Birds of prey drift above the Rio Grande de Mindanao, the second largest river in the Philippines that cuts across the heart of this Muslim-majority autonomous region. It's also a crucial lifeline for the Moros, Muslim natives in the Philippines' southern island group called Mindanao. Locals fish, clean themselves and their clothes, and commute by boat on this waterway. In Catholic-majority Philippines, the Moros have long borne the scars of war, a region historically marginalized, a group of people oppressed, displaced by mass resettlement of Christians from the north. Massacre after massacre of the country's Muslim minority fueled a separatist rebellion in the late 1960s, giving rise to various breakaway groups in the years that followed. Children, Moros and non-Moros alike, are sometimes oblivious to this part of Philippine history.
Gayon noon, na kami mga Bangsamoro ay naalisan ng karapatan na pumunta o makapag-aral. Kasi nga, lagi kami nasa liblib, nagtatago. Ang mga babae, itinatago kasi nga, sorry sa word, nare-rape. Nawawala yung karapatan namin na makapagsalita man lang, lumaban. Kasi nga, wala kaming kalaban-laban.
In 2014, the Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, the country's largest Muslim rebel group, signed a landmark peace deal that ended nearly 4 decades of fighting. The deal would work towards self-governance for what's called the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. BARM is now transitioning to its first parliamentary elections. Former rebels are now learning how to govern. Part of the battle cry of this MILF-backed political party is justice, which still resonates among many Moros nearly 60 years since the secessionist movement began. But peace remains fragile.
We're on our way to the town here in the island province of Basilan, where members of the Philippine military tasked to escort humanitarian workers last January 22 were attacked by lawless elements. 4 ended up dead, 2 were soldiers, and 12 others were wounded.
Sources I spoke to said the attack led to a 30-minute firefight between some 50 state troopers and some 70 armed community members, including those from the MILF. Troops were fired at even as they were rescuing their wounded and retrieving the dead. An indigenous concept called Pintakasi refers to the well-known Filipino spirit of community action. For many men in Mindanao communities used to war, bearing arms is a norm. And when you or your relatives are fired at, you fire back. As state forces reinforced their troops, so did the community. Yet another deadly clash, despite the permanent ceasefire deal signed a decade ago. An MILF commander and a military general operating on the same island province shared food the morning before the January clash to help settle a clan feud known as Rido. Many feel betrayed. But none more than the wife of slain soldier Sergeant Orland James Jamel. He left behind his 7-month-old son, Amir, after 11 years in the military service, deployed to known conflict zones. Amir kisses his father's photo, not knowing it is no longer a video call with him like before. Sergeant Jamel was the family's breadwinner. He was a decorated candidate soldier in jungle warfare and mountain operations. His wife, Judalee, is inconsolable.
Palaging nagpistok, tapos hindi susunod, edi gusto nila ng war, edi mag-war na lang. If this is your plan, bakit kailangan bang may mawala? Sabi mo. Ang lungkot. Ang lungkot talaga. Hanggang ngayon, parang living every day is parang torture lang din sa akin.
Muhagerik Bal is MILF's longtime peace negotiator. He tells me that many MILF members in the January 2025 clash have court-issued arrest warrants. They remain cautious of state forces entering their community. Many amnesty applications of MILF members are still pending. As a former guerrilla fighter in Mindanao's hinterlands, witnessing the difficult transition from militancy to dialogue, Mr. Iqbal stresses that soldiers' operations in MILF communities should be known to MILF commanders.
War is something that is not good for everyone. Everyone is a loser. After all, we belong to the same country. Government forces die, MILF die, we lost. So that's why the only option is really to have peace.
But kinship ties among members of the MILF and of other armed groups complicate the situation on the ground. As some 135 families fled the area of the encounter, mother of three Radya Army Nuril opened their clan's ancestral home to evacuees. Her children left home to seek refuge in the city, but she stayed behind to help those in need in her village.
Pinapasok namin po sa loob. Binigyan ng tubig. Siyempre, takot na takot sila eh. Meron pa mga bagong panganak. Kaya pinapasok namin, binibigyan namin ng tubig kasi takot na takot sila. Sarap kasi sa pakiramdam, ma'am, kapag may natutulungan ka ng mga tao. Lalo na yung araw talaga ng barilan kasi takot na takot po talaga sila.
The house that sheltered the displaced is owned by the village chief, Ali Sakaluran Nuril. The January clash triggered his childhood memory of him carrying his younger sibling to flee from armed conflict.
Siyempre yung bala kasi ma'am, hindi yan pumipili eh. Parang napakover wa. Dahil yung mga civilian nagsirating na. So sinigawan ko yung isang kagawad ko, pati kasama ito, na i-pull out yung mga civilian para hindi sila madamay sa putukan. Sana po hindi maranasan nila yung mga ganun pangyayari po.
On that day, the 63-year-old village chief's mother, Haji Mariam, refused to move to safer grounds. She insisted on staying to cook for her son, who was responsible for the community. She told me she had witnessed more severe clashes and evacuations throughout her life. Just minutes after my chat with her, a fire broke out in their house, which served as halfway home for civilians. The soft-spoken yet resolute Mariam returned to save what she could. Almost like a reflection of the region's turmoil, the fire was sudden and swift. But as the fire raged on, community action emerged. Pintakasi, Filipinos coming together in times of need. War-affected communities are familiar with losses, yet they also know that every loss is followed by rebuilding, mending fractured relationships, and rebuilding one's hope for peace in the Bangsamoro region. These tranquil fields, bearing witness to the chaos its people had to endure.
At least 50 families fled their homes in this village and that nearby one behind me after a 7-hour firefight last February 3. But unlike decades past, this was not an armed encounter between government troops and rebels.
The clash was between fighters of two warring commanders of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, which has an ongoing peace process with the national government. The infighting between the two MILF factions, many of whom are each other's relatives, is rooted in a series of revenge killings linked to a botched arranged marriage from years ago. Norhuda Uto Abdul was among the displaced. She has evacuated due to armed conflict around 5 times in her lifetime now. At 32 years old, she's wired to pack up at the sound of continuous gunshots.
Ginising ko po yung asawa ko. Sabi ko, gising, gising, may putok na naman. Sabi ko sa kanya, dalhin mo yung 2 anak natin, ako lang bahala sa bunso.
Another MILF commander, JP Filmin Imran, helped to mediate between the infighting groups.
May alitan lang sila na konti, hindi sila nagkaintindihan.
Climate Conflict Action Asia notes that such infighting has become more frequent. As of February 2025, 13 of the 28 active clan feuds recorded that led to death and displacement involved the MILF. I ask this of MILF's longtime peace negotiator, Mohagir Iqbal.
We have a limitation. We don't have the police power. Police power still remains with the national government. There are what we call conflicts that are not between government forces and MILF forces, but for instance, conflict over lands, conflict about the so-called RIDO system. So these are issues that we really find extra time really to address that. But, it's a problem that is social in character.
Following the February 3 MILF infighting, 17 loose firearms were confiscated from one of the factions.
Possessing firearms has been a social practice here in the Bangsamoro region. Many feel a personal sense of responsibility over their safety and security, often refusing to outsource them even to law enforcement. But this has led to a proliferation of loose firearms.
The peace process requires the gradual laying down of MILF's arms, or what's called decommissioning, in exchange for cash and a socio-economic package. But Philippine law permits the private ownership of guns. Peace advisor Francisco Lara Jr. has long raised alarm over this issue.
He even cited evidence about interviews made of those who had been decommissioned and reported that they used the money they received to buy new weapons. So it's clear that the weapons are flowing inside the Bangsamoro with wanton disregard for any decommissioning project or any campaign to capture illicit weapons.
International development agencies have expressed willingness to pitch in helping the regional government provide non-monetary incentives for civilians who are willingly surrendering their unregistered firearms. But these newly confiscated ones are homemade or improvised, which shows you the kind of gun culture that exists in the region.
But advocates refuse to call it a gun culture. They say it's a mere personal preference shaped by decades of war. The MILF commander JP has held a gun since he was a teenager. He's spending his afternoon sharing laughter and snacks with his wife, as if the recent crisis in their community that displaced 50 families was just another regular occurrence in their lives. In January, as Commander JP traveled to the city to submit decommissioning papers of fighters under his command, a gunman attempted to kill him in broad daylight. This was still part of the chain of revenge killings in their village. He survived, but not his driver. Commander JP shrugs it off like just another reality of life.
Yung mga tao na yun, mga puro tirador yan. Binabayaran, tsaka yung mga kalaban ipapatayin talaga nila.
Violence has been the norm in many war-affected communities. For some who've been used to fighting, unlearning violence could take time. The winds whistle as thick fog clouds the southern Philippine island of Sulu, the base of a military division that won the war against one of the world's most notorious terror groups. The once terrorized waters, now calm and serene. After over 3 decades, the Philippines has gained the confidence to declare victory against the secessionist-turned-bandit Abu Sayyaf group. Through the years, the group demanded hefty ransoms from kidnappings and decapitated those who would not comply. The Philippine government declared an all-out war, but all wars leave permanent scars.
In 2017, this village was considered a no-man's land. Community members were forced to evacuate after continuous military operations against the Abu Sayyaf group. Residents were able to return to their land after 3 years to slowly rebuild their lives.
Mother of 3, Raisa Salialam, continues to feel the profound sense of loss till this day.
Talaga ma'am, nagalit talaga kami. Kasi yung naramdaman ko, yung awa ko sa nanay ko. Bakit bahay pa ng nanay ko? Wala naman kaming kasalanan. Ano lang kami, pamilyang walang, tapos pagbalik namin dito, wala na. Lahat ng mga kahoy wala na din. Sunog na lahat.
Village Chief Ahajuli Ahajani recalls the bombardment of a community school near his plot of land, as well as the massacre of 7 farmers by elite government troops in 2018, and the deaths of soldiers by fellow soldiers. Ahajuli himself was displaced 3 times for years. I ask if he is angry. He says yes, but counters with a question. What would anger bring? He points to the remnants of the fighting, as if to tell an urgent tale that needs to be heard and seen. Sulu's scenery is among the Philippines' best, but it is a place that's reeling from the trauma of war. The general now in charge of this division admits the path to peace was not achieved solely through military means.
If you are only dealing with war through the guns that you are holding, the problem cannot be resolved. You need to have the right mind, the commitment, in also dealing their affected families. And when the communities in the area saw that from the soldiers of our armed forces deployed here, we were able to somehow win the hearts and minds of the people.
Having earned the community's trust, many families refused to replenish the terrorists' food supply or offer any logistics support like giving them shelter. A former Abu Sayyaf terrorist says financial aid and livelihood support offered by the Philippine government had enticed many to surrender.
Yung hindi namin makakalimutan doon yung mga walang pagkain, kahit yung hindi na makain ng unggoy, kakainin namin kung wala na kaming pagkain. Ngayon, yung nandito na ako, pwede na ako makahiram. Kung may trabaho ako, pwede ko na mabilihan. Yung ang pinagkaiba niya.
Abdusakur Mahailtan is Sulu's outgoing governor. The Tausugs, Muslim natives of Sulu, call him father and boss. The military admits that the leader's agreement to the peace agenda played a crucial role in building trust within the community.
I had to play the game of those who were also in positions of influence. So I had to be like them, but not exactly a warrior or a warlord. But I had to make them understand that I am not governor for just nothing. To seek their support about being together, and they look up to us. Since we are the leaders, I want to maintain that dignity because as a father, I carry the name of the Tausug.
Despite Sulu's progress and the pride he takes in their cultural identity, the governor says the Tausugs are still 50 years behind due to the devastating impact of 50 years of war. He tells the Philippine Senate that Sulu, the birthplace of the Muslim secessionist movement, will abide by a court ruling that declares Sulu is not part of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. Sulu has opposed inclusion in the region during the 2019 plebiscite over political differences as well as historical and cultural identity differences. The Sulu governor shakes hands with the region's leaders to say it's nothing personal, but asserts the autonomy's promised benefits have not trickled down enough to the island province. While Sulu wants out of BARM, there are those who hope the island province would not be left out of the region's progress.
We want this peace to last, but we have to include everyone in the BARM, including the non-Moro IPs.
Not all indigenous peoples or IPs of the region are Muslims.
We're headed to the worship place of one of the non-Muslim indigenous peoples here in southern Philippines, and we're about to witness how the Tedurais, as they are called, were able to preserve their spirituality through the years despite being in the margin of margins of society.
While animist rituals of the Tedurai tribe were preserved, they lagged behind in securing many of their historical rights on paper. Many communities do not yet own titles to their ancestral land.
Importante namin yung lupa, ma'am. Kasi wala kaming matatrabahuan. Wala kaming matataniman. Walang kabuhayan, ma'am ba? Tapos yung mga anak namin, importante din yung mga lupa. Tapos mga kaapuhan, talaga importante namin yan, ma'am.
Some Moro Islamic Liberation Front camps overlap with non-Moro IPs' land claims. Nearly 80 non-Muslim indigenous peoples in and around the Bangsamoro region have been killed between 2018 to 2024 over land, politics, among other reasons. Non-Muslim natives like the Tedurais hope that as the region achieves its long-fought progress, they too will not be left behind.